Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the SAREUM Holdings PLC half-year results investor presentation. Throughout this presentation, investors will be in listen-only mode. Questions are encouraged and can be submitted at any time via the Q&A tab situated on the right-hand corner of your screen. Please just simply type in your question and press send. The company may not be in a position to answer every question it receives during the meeting itself. However, the company review all questions submitted today and publish responses where it is appropriate to do so. These will be available via your Investor Meet Company dashboard, and we will email you when they are ready for your review. I'd also like to remind you that this presentation is being recorded. Before we begin, we would like to submit the following poll, and if you could give that your kind attention, we would be most grateful. And I'd now like to hand over to Stephen Parker, Chairman of SAREUM Holdings PLC. Good morning.
Morning and good morning, everybody. Welcome to this interim results call. We will follow the usual format, which has largely been described to you, but we'll start with a few slides to summarize progress of the company, which will be led by Tim Reeder, our CEO, Tim Mitchell, our CEO, and John Reeder, our CSO, depending on the content of the slides. So without further ado, I will pass you over to Tim.
Thank you, Stephen. So good morning, everybody. I'm Tim Mitchell. I'm CEO and co-founder of SAREUM, and thank you from me for joining us as we present our progress and financial results over the last 6 months. So firstly, I must apologise in the delay in publishing these results. As I'm sure you're aware, the COVID pandemic has made everything that little bit harder. Plus, we've also restructured our finance systems and personnel over the last few months. Before we start, I have to display this disclaimer, which I'll now move on. Our business model, as I'm sure many of you are aware, is to do the early stage design and development of new drug candidates and then license them on to larger pharmaceutical companies for further clinical development and licensing. We have an exciting pipeline of internal and partnered pipeline assets that address emerging high-value disease targets. This business model has been validated by our CHEK1 kinase cancer program, shown in the box on the right there. So working with Cancer Research UK funded organisations, we developed the molecule SAREUM and took it into phase 1 clinical studies before it was licensed to SAREUM Oncology in a $300 million deal. Internally, we're focusing on our TYK2/JAK1 kinase inhibitor programs. We have SDC-1801 targeting autoimmune diseases, including of particular current interest, the cytokine storm that's often the cause of death in COVID-19 patients, and also SDC-1802 targeting cancer and cancer immunotherapy. We're a very experienced team of management directors and advisors with a deep understanding of drug design, development and commercializations, who I'll now introduce you to. So from the top, Stephen Parker, our chairman, has a long career in healthcare and pharmaceutical corporate finance and development. I've worked in large, medium and small pharmaceutical and biotech companies for over 30 years now, with 17 of those being at SAREUM. John Reeder, CSO, has a long career in research in biotech, both in the UK and the US, and has likewise been at SAREUM with me for 17 years. Michael Owen, non-exec director, was biopharmaceuticals head of research at GSK before leaving to be a co-founder and CSO of Kymab. Mike has a long expertise in immunology, which is particularly useful to us. And then Clive Birch, also non-exec director, has a career in audit, specialising in early stage healthcare companies, and is a great asset with our compliance and corporate governance. So this is a snapshot of our research pipeline. At the top, we have our TYK2/JAK1 programs, with SDC-1801 nearly completing its preclinical studies in autoimmune diseases, and the COVID program running alongside it. SDC-1802, the cancer and cancer immunotherapy program, is a little further behind in its preclinical development. SRA737, the CHEK1 inhibitor, has completed 2 phase 2 clinical studies now, one as a monotherapy and the other in combination with low-dose gemcitabine. As well as the gemcitabine combination, there's an emerging body of preclinical data on combinations with other targeted cancer therapies, such as PARP or WEE1 inhibitors, and also cancer immunotherapy. And we'll say more about all these programs in some later slides. So if we move on now to the highlights over the last 6 months or so, then we've made substantial progress in particularly our TYK2/JAK1 programs, despite the challenges of the COVID-19 pandemic. So with SDC 1801, we have our final preclinical studies either underway or scheduled, with intent to file CTA, that's clinical trials authorization, towards the mid of this year. At the end of last year, we announced a 174,000 grant from UKRI, that's UK Research and Innovation, to fund some preclinical studies to explore the potential of SDC 1801 against severe respiratory inflammation caused by COVID and other viral infections. And in our half-year report that we released last week, we noted that there was encouraging initial results demonstrating regulation of the key cytokines involved in COVID-19 in an experiment performed in human lung cells. The final results from this study are expected in the middle of this year. And then for SDC 1802, the cancer and cancer immunotherapy program, we're currently designing translational studies to define the optimal application, the optimal cancer application for this molecule prior to completing the toxicology and manufacturing studies we need to get it into clinical trials. And then at the beginning of this year, we also noted that the patent had been granted for the molecule in the US, which now completes our IP protection for this program in all major territories worldwide. Moving on to the CHEK1 program then, at the back end of last year, we announced an amendment to the license agreement between Sierra and our partners, the CRT Pioneer Fund, which we expect to expedite further development of this program. I'll go into more details on that on a later slide rather than duplicate myself here. And then also early this year, we noted an AACR poster from the Institute of Cancer Research team showing the potential of SRA737 in combination with AZ's WEE1 inhibitor adavosertib in ovarian and breast cancers. On the financial results then, we noted a reported cash of 1.3 million in the bank and a loss after tax for the half year of just over £500,000, similar to the loss we've been running through in previous periods. I'll just have a quick word on the impact of COVID-19 to our operations then. So we are fully operational throughout the pandemic while we follow the government advice to minimise risk to our staff. But we have seen some impact on the company's network of CROs, particularly in lead times to initiate new experiments. And we believe this may extend if there are further restrictions on work and movement. So this has mean the final preclinical studies of particularly the 1801 program have been delayed slightly. We had been hoping to file a CTA earlier in this year, so we now expect it to be mid-year. So let's move on to do a more detailed look at our research programs. Starting with TYK2 and JAK1 then. So these are members of the JAK family of cell signaling enzymes, which are important for maintaining a healthy and well-balanced immune system, and as such are targets of great interest to pharmaceutical companies. There's been good clinical validation for both TYK2 and TYK2/JAK1 combinations from BMS and Pfizer in psoriasis and psoriatic arthritis. And these companies are also running further phase 2 trials in several other autoimmune diseases, including lupus, ulcerative colitis, Crohn's, with readouts expected this year and next. So with that, I'll hand you over to John to update you on the status of our programs.
Thank you, Tim, and good morning, everybody. The JAK family kinases transmit extracellular signals from cytokine receptors, which are expressed on the surface of cells, and they transmit that signal through to the nucleus via the STAT transcription factors. First generation JAK inhibitors, such as Eli Lilly's baricitinib, Pfizer's tofacitinib, target JAK2 and JAK3 as well as JAK1. And it's this JAK2 and JAK3 inhibition that is believed to be responsible for the FDA black box warnings for serious infections, lymphoma and thrombosis that have been issued to the first generation JAK inhibitors. SAREUM's next generation JAK inhibitors target TYK2 and JAK1, which signal the therapeutically relevant cytokines such as interferons alpha and gamma, interleukins 6, 12 and 23 that are associated with autoimmune diseases such as psoriasis, rheumatoid arthritis, IBD, and lupus. Our inhibitors are very selective against JAK2 and JAK3, so we would not expect to see the serious side effects that can arise from JAK2 and JAK3 inhibition. As well as autoimmune disease, TYK2 is associated with certain cancers. In particular, we see that TYK2 and JAK1 modulation of the local immune system results in significant tumor reduction in many cancer models that we've looked at. Also, viral diseases such as COVID-19 and flu can be fatal due to an overreaction of the body's immune system called a cytokine storm, and TYK2 and JAK1 are believed to play an important part in this cytokine response. So we believe there are clear opportunities here for SAREUM. There are currently no TYK2 selective products on the market, and there are no selective TYK2 inhibitors in clinical trials for cancer. That gives us a first-in-class opportunity. As you've heard, we are developing two distinct TYK2 JAK1 kinase inhibitors. Both are potent inhibitors of TYK2 and JAK1 with good selectivity over JAK2 and JAK3 and the rest of the kinome. In our mouse model experiments, we dose the compounds orally twice daily, but based on modeling, we believe we'll be able to dose once daily in any human studies. We've mentioned the potential of the TYK2 JAK1 inhibitors to treat the cytokine storm, the fatal overreaction in many COVID-19 patients, and we'll say a little bit more about that in a later slide. So our internal focus is on completing the preclinical studies for SDC-1801 and SDC-1802 so that their clinical development can be initiated. The manufacturing route for SDC-1801 is complete, so we're able to manufacture hundreds of gram quantities for our toxicology and for clinical studies. We've also developed a formulation that's suitable for getting the high doses of compound that we need to deliver for our toxicology studies. And as we've noted previously, we're aiming to complete these studies and apply for a clinical trials application to initiate trials towards the middle of this year. We're working on the translational studies to define the optimal cancer application for SDC-1802 before we complete the tox studies for that molecule. The manufacturing route, which is very similar to that used for SDC-1801, is almost complete. We've presented these programs to many potential pharmaceutical partners, and we'll be looking to strike commercial licenses anytime, really, from CTA onwards, always bearing in mind the risk to return balance of an early versus a later stage licensing. Moving on to the role of TYK2 and JAK1 in the cytokine storm, the overreaction to viral infections, we've noted a growing body of literature evidence to support the potential of a selective TYK2 JAK1 inhibitor to be an effective therapy here. COVID-19 and other viral diseases can be fatal due to the cytokine storm overreaction of the immune system that goes on to severely damage the lungs and other organs. And most of the key cytokines that have been found to be elevated in COVID-19 patients that have been admitted to intensive care signal via the JAK family kinases. Both Pfizer and Lilly have recently announced clinical trials on their JAK1/2 or JAK1/3 inhibitors, tofacitinib and baricitinib, in COVID-19 patients, and certainly in the baricitinib trial, at least reduced mortality and time to recovery, a reduced time to recovery has been reported. Viral lung infections can also lead to secondary bacterial infections, such as pneumonia, causing further complications in patients with severe COVID-19. There's good evidence in the literature that TYK2 and JAK1 inhibition should restore the body's protection against these bacterial infections, whereas JAK2 inhibition by, for example, baricitinib, is likely to downgrade the defense to bacterial infection. So this all points to a TYK2 JAK1 inhibitor that is selective against JAK2, having an optimal profile here, and that's exactly what we've got with SDC 1801. We were awarded a grant from UKRI in December last year to investigate SDC 1801 in cellular and animal models of COVID. And we've seen encouraging initial results from the cellular studies that show that SDC 1801 does indeed reduce the levels of cytokines associated with the cytokine storm in human lung cells that were infected with SARS-CoV-2 virus. We expect to complete these studies, including the mouse model studies, by the middle of this year. And we're also encouraged by the amount of UK government support for COVID research, as well as the UKRI funding we've received. There are opportunities from other areas, as the Therapeutics Task Force, the Agile Early Clinical Development Platform. There were some other developments announced this week for Antivirals Task Force. The government's really getting behind research in this area, and we hope and expect that we can benefit from that. Moving on then to our partnered candidate, SRA737, a CHEK1 inhibitor, as well as completing 2 phase 2 clinical studies in the hands of our licensed partner, Sierra Oncology. SRA737 has continued to show exciting potential in a number of preclinical combination studies. So we've previously reported the triple combination of SRA737, low-dose gemcitabine, and the immune checkpoint therapy, which is shown in this xenograph on the left-hand side of the slide, where we're seeing 100% tumor regression in this preclinical model of small cell lung cancer. Last month, it was reported at the AACR that combination with a new type of targeted anti-cancer therapy known as WEE1 inhibitors also leads to good tumor regression in a preclinical ovarian cancer model, and that's shown in the chart on the right. The monotherapy trials with SRA737 and the combination trial with low-dose gemcitabine both highlighted the excellent safety profile of SRA737, and this makes it really suited to combining with other agents. And hopefully we won't see any additional safety signals arising from the SRA737 being added into those combinations. Okay, I'm going to hand you back to Tim to complete the rest of the presentation.
Thank you, John. I'm sorry, I've jumped ahead too much. So I'll just finish this part of the presentation with the current clinical development status of SRA737. So the program had been stalled in development while SAREUM decided its way forward. Towards the end of last year, we announced that the license agreement between our partners CPF and Sierra Oncology had been renegotiated. So this reduced the total amount of milestone payments, as you see, from around 320 million to 290 million, but introduced a new payment of 2 million that would be due on the first patient in any next clinical trial. SAREUM still remains eligible for its 27.5% share of the deal, which would result in a $550,000 payment being payable on the next milestone, and our share of future milestones totaling up to $79.75 million. Plus, of course, the royalties are unchanged in the deal. So the license renegotiation reduces the financial hurdles for the continuation of the clinical development of SRA737, and we believe this will expedite its further development, and we look forward to providing updates as and when we hear from Sierra. So I'll move on now to the financial reports results that we reported last week. So looking at the income statement, we see a loss there of around £550,000. That's entirely consistent with the loss from previous years. And then moving on to the balance sheet, we see a cash balance of around 1.3 million. Yeah, okay. So if we look forward now to what we might expect to achieve during the rest of 2021, so we're looking forward to reporting updates on the SDC-1801 preclinical tox studies, and many of these events are going to happen around this summer. So there's potential for the SDC-1801 CTA submission again in the summer, and a phase 1 clinical trial start towards the end of this year. We look forward to providing updates on the UKRA funded COVID-19 studies and what we believe our next steps will be on that. Again, that should be in the middle of this year. And then updates on the progress of SDC-1802 through its preclinical and translational journey. And that's harder to put a time to, but the back end of this year. And then for the CHEK1 program, then we look forward to clarity from Sierra on the future development funding and plans for this program. There's potential future milestone payments, as I described earlier, on clinical trial advancement, and potential for the triple combination or any of the other combinations to get to either continue or to start in their clinical trials. So we're expecting to report important progress during 2021 as we continue the advancement of our internal programs 1801 and 1802.
Tim, thank you very much indeed. And also thank you to Stephen and to John for your update today. Could I please ask investors to continue to submit questions using the Q&A tab situated on the right-hand corner of your screen? But just while the company take a few moments to review those investor questions submitted today, I'd like to remind you that a recording of this presentation, along with a copy of the slides and the published Q&A, will be accessed via your Investor Meet Company dashboard, and we'll send you an email to notify you when that's ready for your review. I'd also like to remind you that your feedback is important to the company. Immediately after the presentation has ended, you'll be redirected for the opportunity to provide feedback in order that the company can better understand your views and expectations. Tim, investors had the ability to pre-submit questions. We received 3. So ahead of looking at the live Q&A, perhaps I could start with these. The first question reads, is in regards to SAR737, and it says, can you please explain what is meant by the term timely manner in regards to progressing SR SAR 737. Is there a definition of what timely manner set within the contract? Has there been a formal agreement to what constitutes a timely manner? And is there a legal definition of how long a timely manner can last? And really, how would you go about challenging whether Sierra are acting in a timely manner? Perhaps I could hand back to you, Tim.
Question. So there's no formal definition of timely manner, but in the license agreement, and remember that's struck between the CRT Pioneer Fund and Sierra Oncology, with us as essentially investment partners. But in that license agreement, there are standard due diligence clauses, which again have that there's no formal time definition. Unfortunately, it's something for courts to sort out if there's a challenge.
That's great. Thank you very much. The second question we received is given the great progress and the strong science, can you provide where the company stands with commercial arrangements? Do we have any companies courting us? How many NDAs, heads of terms are in place? Obviously within the scope, I guess, of what's permitted that you can say there, Tim, please.
So we continue to engage with a number of potential partner companies, but we're not really able to say at what stages there are or the numbers involved.
Thank you very much indeed. And the final pre-submitted question is, given the delays created by the pandemic, would it not be sensible to delay the CTA for 1801 and await POC for COVID? Should POC prove positive, then the value of the company would increase, making funding easier and reduce the dilutive effect of a potentially faster.
Sure. Okay. So there's no significant cost involved in filing a CTA. So I don't really see any reason to delay the filing in case we need to wait for the COVID data results to come out.
Thank you very much indeed, Tim. That takes care of the three pre-submitted questions. Obviously, investors have had the ability, Tim, throughout this meeting to submit questions in the live event. Perhaps if I could ask you to just open up the Q&A tab on the right-hand corner of the screen. If I could ask you, of course, where it's appropriate, to read out the question and perhaps who it's from and give a response, and then I will pick up for you at the end before directing investors to provide you with feedback.
Okay, so if I pick up the questions and then forward them to John or Stephen to answer if that's most appropriate. I'm going to start with a question from Paul B. Then it's about detailing a patent submitted in 2020. I think this refers to a patent that was published. It's a UK patent, and I'll get John to step in, where the UK authorities are slightly unusual in that they publish the headline details of a patent or before the full amount of the patent is published. John, do you want to pick that up on that?
Yeah, I can do. So typically when you submit a patent application, there's an 18-month period in which it's essentially kept confidential. As Tim says, the UK Patent Office is slightly unusual in that they publish the title of the patent application, which is why you sometimes see extremely esoteric titles or obscure titles like invention of pharmaceutical compounds, for example. But what happens in the rest of the world is that you have an 18-month period of time during which your data that you've submitted is kept confidential, and you're able to submit additional data to support your patent application. And so, we, in common with all other companies, make full use of that 18-month period of confidentiality, and we're not going to publish what the contents of that patent application are, because it would give potentially a commercial benefit to our competitors. So I'm afraid for that particular patent, you have to be patient and wait the 18 months, and then it will be published, and the whole world can read what that's all about.
Thank you, John. So question from Darren N. It's about any more information from the observations seen in the human lung cell in the COVID experiment. I think all we'll say at the moment is they were all preliminary and very initial results, and then we'll make note of the complete result once the program has finished Well, the experiments are due to finish in June this year. It may take us a while to put together or analyse the results to make an announcement.
I'll just add one thing, Tim. The questioner has asked about potential for other lung conditions. Alongside the COVID experiments, we're also running the same experiments with H1N1 influenza virus. So we are getting additional data for flu, in essence, and we saw similar encouraging results, even though early stage, and there's still work to do.
Okay, a question from Robert M. So do the founders have an exit strategy in the timescales? I'm not sure whether this is for the company or personally. I think we can safely say that John and myself don't have an exit strategy, and I'm not sure we can really comment on sort of future corporate activities of the company. There's another patent question. Well, a question on 1801 and commercializations. Well, actually on a number of aspects actually. So from Brian G, thank you for this. I'll just sort of pick up the various bits of it. So he asks, is the lack of SDC 1801 patent having an effect on potential licenses? So 1801 is fully patented. It's just that the patents haven't been granted yet. So there's no lack of patents. And the fact that SDC 1802, which is a similar molecule, got patented in all the major worldwide territories suggests we shouldn't have any problem with the granting of 1802. So a follow-on question on hope the patents be granted in 2021, and I think the answer is we just don't know. I mean, the patent authorities are a bit of a law unto themselves, and there's no way of telling when we expect the patents to grant. And then there's a further question about a competitor to the company, TLL, took 1 year to complete the initial clinical, so the initial part of a phase 1 clinical study, and would we expect a similar time frame for 1801? And I would say yes. A SAD/MAD study, so single ascending dose, multiple ascending dose, is a fairly standard a piece of work that we would expect to take around a year to complete. Another one from Paul B about more details on the activities completed on the COVID test. I think we've probably answered that with the question from Darren, actually, in that there are, it's really too early to tell, and we'll report the full data such as we have it later in the year. So a question from Robin D about any particular reasons to believe there may be some progress soon on 737 and indications from Sierra. So they haven't actually announced anything. I mean, it's difficult to say too much at this stage, I suppose. I think we're really waiting for indications from them. But I suppose, well, they wouldn't have bothered to renegotiate the license if they hadn't intended or had any intention of taking the program forward. And I think we can take some comfort from that. There's a similar question from Mark S about well, is there any pressure we can apply on Sierra? So of course we're the minor investment partner alongside CRT Pioneer Fund on this, so our hands are slightly tied, but obviously CPF can push forward the due diligence requirements, I suppose, should they so wish, and obviously we're very keen for the program to go ahead, but it's there's a limited amount of what we can actually do. So another question from Roger S. In respect of cytokine activation. So I think we've partly answered this one actually about evidence that our therapy may ameliorate other acute lung conditions. And as John pointed out, that we are also looking at H1N1 influenza, and I think that there's literature evidence out there that this sort of cytokine suppression may be effective, and yeah, we could get round to testing that in due course, but at the moment we're only looking at COVID and H1N1. Is there anything else you want to add, John?
No, I don't think so. I mean, there are, as the question has pointed out, there are other illnesses that could benefit from this, but under the grant that we have, we are limited to looking at COVID-19 and influenza. We can make a judgment later on if we want to look at alternatives. Certainly, cytokine storm is very dangerous. It's associated with T-cell, CAR T-cell therapies and anti-cancer therapy, for example. So there are certainly other opportunities, but we're not actively looking at the moment.
Thanks, John. Moving on then, there's a question from Mark S. So are there any new and exciting programs running in the background? So no, our focus is 100% on the two TYK2 JAK1 programs. We do keep an eye out for exciting opportunities going on in other companies or targets that we could address from our kinase library platform. But at present, we are 100% focused on getting particularly 1801 completed through its preclinical development. So a question from James M. then. So the confidence level on the COVID-19 work. So I think, yeah, again, it's, we've had one set of cellular experiments, so it's a little bit early to tell. Hopefully we'll know more when the further work is completed. Similar question on that topic from Glenn G. Thank you for that, but I think I've already answered that. So there's a couple of questions actually on funding expectations from Mark S. And I saw one from somewhere else somewhere. I might have lost that now. But I think we've already explained in the presentation that it's a balance of income from an early stage deal versus the ability to raise funds and the commercial risk of progressing into the clinic, with the expectation of getting a much larger license deal with some clinical data behind us. So it's really about that risk-return balance of early versus late licensing, and we're not really in a position to say anything on either of those. Question from Roger F. Then. Yes, so yeah, it's I think we talked about well, the focus has been on 1801 at the moment, and some delay in 1802 due to available funds. But the question is, if funding was available, would you and John have the capacity to progress it? And I think the answer is yes. That there'd be no problem in our internal bandwidth in progressing the program. Question from Robin D on the BMS data for deucravacitinib. So this is BMS's TYK2 specific program. So has it changed our view of the competitive position on TYK2? And I don't think it particularly has. I think the phase 3 data backs up the good phase 2 data that they published some time ago. And yeah, Robin also notes that there seems to be growing competitive activity in the space. and I think we'd agree with that, but we're fully confident of our molecule's ability to compete in the area. Question from a Lee S. Have the encouraging results been reported to UKRI? So we have regular meetings with, it's called a monitoring officer appointed by UKRI. I'm not sure how much actually gets back to UKRI. John, do you want to pick that up?
Well, yeah, so we have reported the early results to our grant monitoring officer, and I would imagine he fed that back to his colleagues at UKRI.
Thank you. Okay, so I think that is, I'm just looking through the ones that I think we're able to answer at the moment. There are one or two other outstanding ones which I think are, which I suppose have some amount of commercial or other sensitivity associated with them. So if you forgive us, we will we'll take a while to give you a written answer to those. Well, yeah, once we've had a discussion between us, and of course it may be that we are not able to comment, but in which case we'll acknowledge the question and just say that I'm afraid we're not able to comment. So thank you for all those questions. I think if there are no further ones,
no, that's brilliant, Tim. Thank you very much indeed. And of course, thank you to all the investors that have shown interest today and submitted all the questions. And we will make them, as you said, available to you, Tim, to review and add responses should that be the appropriate thing to do so. I know investor feedback is important, and with the number of investors on the call, we'd be grateful if you could just give Tim and the team your feedback, your views, your expectations. But before I do so, Tim, perhaps I could just hand back to you just for a few closing remarks. That'd be great.
Yes, thank you, Mark. Well, yes, thank you again for listening to the presentation. I hope we've been able to demonstrate that we've made good progress during this half year, and we have a very exciting 6 months or so ahead of us. So thank you again.
That's great. Tim, Stephen and John, thank you very much indeed for updating investors today. Could I please ask investors not to close this session, as you'll now be automatically redirected for the opportunity to provide your feedback. If you access this meeting from our website, then the feedback page will simply appear. If you access this by the link sent you by email, you will be asked to log back in just to provide your feedback, but it is incredibly useful to the company. On behalf of the management team of SAREUM Holdings PLC, I'd like to thank you very much for your time today. That now concludes today's session, and good morning to you all.